Thank you, Professor Sabih, Dr. Sabih Mushatta, Dr. Sabih Farhan, our partners in Iraq. And let me just start by expressing my incredible appreciation and gratitude to the government of Iraq and their excellencies, the Minister of Culture, Heritage and Antiquities, and the Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research, and the chancellors of Baghdad University and Wasit University, as well as, of course, senior advisor for the Prime Minister. I think we are very humbled that they have read through our network project. They have looked at the agenda and they supported it. And I was really pleased to hear from the Minister of Culture that they have a clear vision and agenda on how heritage is central to the sustainable development of Iraqi cities. And they are putting heritage and its preservation at the very heart of the cultural institutions, society development, and having a look at raising public awareness and training professionals and young people for the future. So it's very pleasing that we think that Iraq was, as rightly mentioned by all our kind speakers, very much at the heart of heritage in the Middle East. That's one of the key reasons for choosing them, Iraq, as a kind of center for this hub, and this is what tells us. I also need to express my appreciation to Professor Nigel Wright, the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation at Nottingham Trent University, for his incredible support to our network and to the research that has been going on. And it's just needless to say that to reach this point, we are almost 2 years in the making. It has been a long planning process, lots of proposals, discussions, debates. We have an incredible number of partners: University of Birmingham, University of Nottingham, University of Leeds, University of Wasit, of course, University of Baghdad. We have partners from India, Praxis India, and we have SAPT, School of Planning and Architecture, SAPT in Delhi and SAPT in Ahmedabad. Of course, Praxis NGO in India, our main regional hub coordinator, and we have also partners in Iraq, in Egypt, and so many other countries. The list is quite long, and it has been really a very comprehensive and coherent collaboration between many partners on a shared agenda. And I think this brings me to the starting point here, what this engaged network is about. I think it's important to recognize that we are at a challenging time. And if you open the news at any stage, that you will see that there is at some point or some region of the world, there is major damage to our cities, heritage, and the communities who have guarded and protected and produced that heritage are struggling for a long time. And actually, what we normally don't look at is just how the livelihood of many societies and communities really are damaged by that loss of heritage. So we have looked at the challenges that we need to look at to really encounter when it comes to heritage protection, and what is necessary to look at what our current societies are going through. Then we really looked at the loss of increasingly loss of cultural heritage in many areas in the world, and of course here we are focusing on the Middle East. And as you can see from what we heard from our speakers and from what happened in a number of cities during the instability in some of places like Mosul and tourism, but also we have certain activities of approaching heritage with a little bit lack of awareness of their importance, but also there are communities in places that they are remote from living remotely from the decision maker centers. So we are seeing a loss of heritage through various ways. And what we need to look at how the international community are responding to it. So heritage are very much ingrained into our lives, into different communities, and they are it's actually integrated in their livelihood, economies, culture, education, and also language and the way that we live and eat. These challenges with every bit of material heritage or built heritage is lost, there is a devastating long-term impact on that society. Hence, you will find a vicious cycle where any conflict, any insecurity, any instability that would not naturally cause destruction, insecurity, displacement. But the long term, if you trace the long term journey of those who lived and guarded that heritage or even produced it, you'll find that there is an incredible mushroom effect of the loss of that heritage from the livelihood, education, social network, and this by result will contribute to really poverty, vulnerability, and disappearing, and then result toward the end in gender inequality, because women and young people, mainly girls, are the most that are really suffering from that damage and displacements. There are disappearing traditions, and there are actually, in some cases, vanishing languages, because accents, dialects, and language are affected. And as we have seen in Beirut, that one just act, maybe not deliberate, maybe accidental, but just could wipe out a huge part of old cities. Then we set the agenda following several months of discussions and debate. What is needed? What we are missing? What is the UNESCO perhaps is not covering? And we appreciate that the UNESCO incredible effort and huge global investments in supporting heritage preservation, human, cultural, tangible, and intangible. But through a detailed scrutiny, we found that with all the investment and support, international and national, that the focus mostly about what are the heritage assets are. Little has been done in actually countering the community behind them, the livelihood, the tangibility of that heritage. And hence we try to really use that heritage, try to really reverse this formula, to try to put community at the center and to use that community heritage that doesn't know borders, doesn't know conflicts, but does know about cultural exchange, as has everything to do with socioeconomic development in deprived communities. How we can work with marginalized communities on opportunities, capacity building, and embedding resilience. Then we agreed amongst the partners and in the regional hubs to really work collaboratively with research partners, and we try to set as 3 regions where we can have central hubs where we as partners, like today, as an example of this, come together, discuss, debate, and exchange knowledge and experiences. And we think that there are some room and a scope here for developing what we call humanitarian heritage. How we are as human race just collaboratively and collectively just work towards producing heritage and preserving it, but not only as assets, as part of our everyday life. So this is a kind of a strategic framework for building resilience and countering conflict or instability in any places. Here, the aim of the network is to foster equitable partnerships and collaboration with research partners, but also with stakeholders, NGOs, community representatives, and policymakers to help them to make the right decisions. As we have seen now, the incredible support from the Iraqi governments need some support from us on the shared understanding and role of cultural heritage sites, practices, and communities, how we can develop long-term sustainable and inclusive peace, and how we try to eliminate or at least make it more blurred borders of conflict. And conflict here doesn't mean international borders at all, just could be in the same community, in the same city, in the same neighborhood. It's just these sometimes are invisible borders. The network, briefly here, we have set up 3 regional hubs. Each one is covering certain region. We have partners from 12 countries, and we have over 25 partners from academic institutions, stakeholders, governments, NGOs, and so on. These are the 3 regional hubs. We are talking today and working with many partners in Iraq, but we will have next month, it will be in India, and then we'll give you details later. And later in the year, we'll establish the Tunisia, North Africa's hub. The network is set up to develop theoretical framework, which would actually try to really help us envision new way to preserve heritage communities and their way of life. So to avoid that any the erasure of heritage is just to be more countered in a systematic and coherent way, but also try to learn from examples, try to build capacity building to mobilize heritage assets, and try to create, try to help invest in developing avenues of engagement and exchange as a way to build resilience. The work that we have developed in the network just mapped 4 critical themes that where the network would help envision in order to reach its collective plan. The theme 1 about what we are doing today, about creating the infrastructure of heritage partnerships where researchers, policymakers, and community representatives and hear voices on the ground to really write and sit down together and then agree and see what are the local challenges and how to counter them. But also we realize that heritage is connected to many other places and activities like heritage hospitalities and tourism. Theme 3 is about working with communities and young people and vulnerable individuals, women and girls, and try to really help them to integrate, create a creative art and craft and cultural co-production. And we have our partners who lead on each one of these themes. And the final one, we learned the narrative of displacement, grievance, and impact, because we know any destruction of heritage constitute movement of people, and people lose their connection to their heritage. So just to try to really wrap up quickly, today's workshop is actually try to build the first international debate in the Middle East, in the region, around 3 particular themes. And this basically try to really bring researchers together, try to work with the stakeholders and discuss the communities of heritage, and also try to talk to policymakers because they have a lot of challenges and try to really work around a lot of issues and concerns on the ground, how to preserve heritage, but also how to rebuild damaged cities and damaged areas. Hence, just to wrap up that by the end of this session, and we will go through 3 parallel tracks of research of panels. Each one will respond to one of the workshop themes, one on the research, one on stakeholders, and one on policymakers. And during that, you can really attend one or move to another and so on. And at the end, we will give you a full details or reporting on our activities in Iraq, where we have a big research team led thankfully by Dr. Sabih Farhan, but also with Dr. Durgham Al-Ubaidi from University of Baghdad, Chair of Architecture, and Dr. Ola Mary from University of Babylon. Thanks, Dr. Sabih. This is just a brief encounter considering time, and handing over to you before to conclude the first session.